welcome everybody to another 2026 Co-Produce Care live chat. And we're absolutely delighted to have some fantastic panelists for our session today. So today we're going to be talking about funding disputes and client rights. So what providers need to know. And we are going to be joined by Ali George, who's at Arcadia Care Homes, Paula Cashmore, who's an independent care quality consultant, Sarah Wilcox, who's Pathways Through Dementia at there, and also Belinda Schreer, who's at Cascada Kick. So fantastic panel. And also a lot of people I think you will already know. And the reason why this came up is because I was on the fantastic Providers Unite chat on WhatsApp, and something came up about local authorities really trying to move people on when the real reason for them moving people on is their costs. And this has obviously got huge implications for people we support, for their livelihoods, for their stress levels, for their health, for their best interests. And there's a lot of complexity around it. And I feel as providers, care providers, sometimes people feel very disempowered. They feel unable to really put their case forward, especially if some providers are painted as just needing people to be in their care homes to keep it functioning. Actually, if somebody is really happy where they are and they should be there for their own health, their home safety, their well-being, their personal choice, they should be enabled to be there. And it shouldn't just come down to local authorities moving people just because of price and not going through certain criteria which they need to go through. And so we're trying to tackle that disempowerment that people feel and enable people who support people, managers, providers, to have the knowledge and tools and understanding of what they can do to support people that they care for to exercise their rights in that situation. So I'm really, really grateful to both Belinda and Paula for putting this subject in front of people's awareness. And of course, at Co-Produce Care, we are all about trying to raise awareness about things that are happening in social care. So this is one of the things I'm really glad to be bringing forward to everyone. But before I bring people in, I just want to say this isn't all we're doing this year. This is just the start. And obviously, I'm really grateful to be able to start with this one. But next month, and we're trying to do a podcast like this every month and even more frequently. If we can get sponsors, that'd be great. Get in touch. So next month, we're going to be talking about Prepared, Not Scared, the essential conversation about death and dying. So this one, 3rd of February, similar to today. Don't worry if you can't join us live. Great if you can. It'll be recorded and sent out to you. Same with this discussion, but don't go anywhere because I want you to be in the chat for this because you've got fantastic knowledge coming up. But if you want to keep in touch with what we're doing, make sure that you join our mailing list. We will put it into the chat. And if you're joining us on YouTube anyway, just click subscribe and click the bell, and that gives you notifications because we haven't got this down to a T yet. I'm not streaming it every Monday at 9 o'clock. I haven't got that down yet, but I know that I'm going to be doing it every month, and I really need you all to support us where we can. So without further ado, I'm going to just have a couple of asks. Please if you are watching us on YouTube, please like us. If you're watching us on LinkedIn, please also share and like. And it just makes sure that people who need to hear about this. You can also copy the link and put it on your WhatsApps and spread it out to get more people involved and in the conversation, because we're going to have an opportunity to talk to our guests and to ask them questions. So please, in the chat, anything that comes up as my guests are speaking, pop it in the chat and we will address them as they come up, or maybe just a little bit after they've started to speak. Okay, so let's get going. I'm going to bring in Belinda and Paula. Hello both, and good afternoon. Happy lunchtime. How are you both today, Belinda?
Thank you for having me. Very well, very well. Delighted to be here.
Lovely.
Yes, same here, Sophie. Great to be here and great to be sharing awareness.
Yes, and it really is about that raising of awareness. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about this subject myself. I'm going to let the experts do do the thing, do the job. So could I ask you, Paula, actually, to just talk about yourself, what organisation you work for, and the subject matter, how it came to you, and why it's important.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm still a registered nurse. I've been in the care sector for over 40 years now. I'm interested in quality. I do mock inspections. I support managers to run compliance services. And what's become more apparent is that social services don't seem to be keeping the law. It's getting increasingly frustrating to see managers just saying so and so has to move because they can't meet our funding. That prompted a conversation with Belinda around Providers Unite and educating providers as to what social services can and can't do. Because the main thing that we want is for residents and for clients to have the best care. And if they have chosen to invest their savings, to invest their inheritance in good quality care, that really, according to the law, as Belinda will tell us, they have no right to take that away and to move them to other facilities just because of LA funding issues. And that I have successfully challenged when I was a manager. And as I've become more independent and going around a lot more places, I see it happening more and more. It's becoming a theme.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I know that you have developed some tools that providers can tap into to learn more about that. And we'll hear about that in a second. But before you discuss that, I'd like to hear from you, Belinda, the legal expert, the importance of this subject matter and why it is that you felt it was important for providers to be much more aware about how they can support people to exercise their rights.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a lawyer by background, but by inclination and habit, I am a mouthy, maverick commentator about the disregard for the legal framework that's generally going on in adult social care. And I've only spent about 25 years doing it, and it hasn't got any better recently. So I wish I could agree and go so far as to say that what you think should be the law and what Paula thinks should be the law is the law, but it's not as black and white as that. It's not the law that you can stay in a care home that you've put your money into just because you've put your money into it for as long as you like. The situation is that whilst you're a private client, you have to abide by the contract yourself with the care home. And if they put their fees up, your options are limited. You will ultimately have to leave. But if you have become someone to whom the local authority owes a duty because your capital has gone down under £23,250, then when the council hears about that and you can notify them in advance, they're absolutely legally obliged to assess you. And every month, there are local government ombudsman reports finding councils at fault for inappropriate management of the process at that stage. So, usually at that stage, as long as the person doesn't just need to live in a hotel and actually needs some care, the council will have said to the relatives, yes, your relative is eligible, but here's our list of homes that we do business with. Please choose one that you can bear, or else hand over your top up money. And then they say, this was your choice or your loved one's choice in the first place, so it's the rules that apply now. So, what does the ombudsman do? Well, when members of the public have got the gumption to complain about this, The local government ombudsman reminds councils that their absolute duty under the Care Act is to assess first to see if a professional social worker could even defensively decide that the person is in a fit state to be able to be moved on therapeutically. And if the answer is yes, it's not likely to kill them, it's not likely to throw them straight into depression. If the answer is yes, the council then has to locate and identify a suitable care home to move that person to. And the features that they have to take into account at that point in order to be able to do what we would like them not to be able to do. So I'm explaining what they do have to do. They have to take one's well-being into account, and that includes one's psychological well-being. They have to take your emotional and psychological needs into account and your mental capacity. And if you're lacking in capacity, they can't just pick you up and cart you off. They have to go through a best interests decision in which your relatives will be consultees as to what you would have thought was in your best interests if you still have got capacity. Even if you've not got much capacity, they need to take account of the person in the bed's wishes and feelings and their human rights. And this often staggers providers because they think that they're businesses. But if they are looking to provide a service to a publicly funded person, then they owe that person human rights directly as if the care home was the state. So, what you then find is that councils will struggle to find that it's okay to move someone on, but they will still tell the relatives that the going rate in the area is an utterly unbelievable sum of money in terms of a low rate. And they say that's what your loved one's budget is. So if we can find a home at that rate, then your relative will still have to move unless you pay a top up. What actually stops them from doing that is that most care homes need to charge far more these days than the local authority would like them to have to charge. So, for instance, last week, the Ombudsman found a council saying that people's personal budgets for dementia care were £515 a week, when the evidence was that they knew it was going to cost 1,000. So instead of wanting the family to pay the difference between 1,000 and £1,300 a week for a particularly lovely, posh care home, the local authority tried telling the family that they would need to cover the whole of the difference between £515 and the full rate of the care home. And the law is this: if a local authority cannot find a halfway suitable care home at the rate that they've asserted is enough, then they cannot tell the person that they must pay a top up. They must meet the full cost of discharging the statutory duty to the client. It's not a choice then that counts for triggering a top up. And that is the thing that some providers are beginning to grasp, and they are helping members of the public assert their rights. And that's the thing that members of the family absolutely need to know. That's what I would sum up the law as being.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that lots of people have learnt from you just talking about it, even though that was a short summary of what appears to be quite a complex process that local authorities need to go through. And from the sounds of it, I'm not sure many the local authorities maybe understand that's what they have to do, or maybe they're trying to make shortcuts. I don't know. You probably have more in terms of case studies and of your experience, but I get the sense that it is so complicated that providers really need to get some type of training that they can absorb, that they can really understand what it is that they need to do, how the system works. And I think that's something that you've worked really hard to put forward and create. And I wonder if, Paula, you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, when we came across this problem. Belinda is so passionate in educating people and giving the right information for providers. So we collaborated, and I'm hosting a webinar series. I have hosted a webinar series which is available to buy on my website, achievablecarequalitycommunity.co.uk. And there are different topics that Belinda went through and discussed how to apply the law, how to interpret, and lots of case studies. That's available for people to buy either as a set for the whole 8 videos, or individually if you just want access, lifetime access for one particular subject. And that then Belinda has done the presentations. You can go back, make notes. Belinda's so comprehensive and she knows her stuff. So that's there. And then Belinda also runs Cascader with, I very often point people to Cascader for the information that's on there too.
That's really good. And yes, Belinda, did you want to come in?
I was just going to say to Paula, do you want to say what happened in terms of when we ran the sessions?
It was incredibly disappointing. I had put out the information. It was a low-cost webinar for people to join, and we had no providers. We just had a family member that joined us, and somebody who was involved in insurance who wanted to know more about the law. And was I surprised? I probably was surprised. People don't know these things, but they're not educating themselves and investing even small sums of money to try and help themselves and help the system. It's devastating.
I think what it made me realise is that for providers who are already hard up, asking them to learn anything that involves paying any money in this particular culture is something that they just aren't feeling confident enough to do. But the irony is they're busy providing services to local authorities for free and not using the public law legal framework to contend that local authorities are funding the care homes unlawfully. And that's something that any provider is now able to do since the Stoke City case last January. I think the distasteful implication of lack of provider interest is that providers and local authorities find it easier to collude over top-ups. And what it basically means is that the provider needs to charge, or thinks that they need to charge, X pounds. The council wants to pay only half of X pounds. So between them, they figure out that if they can persuade the relatives to pay the difference, that's going to keep everybody on the road. The show is going to be able to continue. But the real truth about top-ups is that they've only ever been allowed to cover wants and not needs. So if the top-up is about 400 quid a week, you've got to be able to say to the provider, excuse me, what is it that you're providing that isn't going to be in the care plan from the council that is worth £400 a week? And they will say, well, it's a lifestyle choice, or it's the ambience. They're not saying it's smoked salmon for these people and fish fingers for those people. That is not how care homes run. And so really it is a collusive bridge between local authorities and providers who don't know any better, whereas I had hoped to be able to educate providers to be more ethical and to basically say, hell no, we won't go as low as any local authority wants us to go, because it is literally impossible. And Mark Carney said last week, as the Canadian head of state, we've got to take the signs in the windows down that just suggest everything is functioning properly. And I, for one, believe in speaking truth to power.
A lot of providers don't even know that they are in a negotiating position. And I think that's the frustration. Lindsay in the chat has said how tired providers are, scared, tired, and it's hard work. And it really is. But the more providers that understand what their rights are and how to deal with these disputes, the more that social services will realise that they're on a sticky wicket, and they better start acting professionally.
So I think this is all so true, and I think a lot of people are going to relate to it. And I want to come back to this, but it's just to remind people that your courses are in the link. There's links in the chat. We've been putting them on the screen, but in the description, the chat, you should be able to find them and click on them and explore them. It sounds like you can pick and choose some that you think are relevant, or you can buy a package. I, for one, definitely want to share them with my team so that they can be a bit more aware, because I think it is about that awareness and understanding what's there. Before we move on, I really want to, because we're running a bit behind, but I think we will catch up, just an example of some of the lack of awareness that we have of the system and how it works. And we did a bit of this in the prep session. We talked about the monitoring officer, and I had never heard about a monitoring officer. And this is something that I learned from talking to you both about the work that you do. And I don't know whether maybe Belinda, you can explain to people who that is, and how you help people interact with that individual within the local authority to help put things forward.
Sure, yes. The monitoring officer has to exist in every local authority, and they are the lead governance officer. Usually, they are the head of the legal department, and their duty is to keep a listening ear out for literally anybody writing to them or phoning them to tell them that they suspect that the council is about to embark on something unlawful. And the duty of the monitoring officer, then, when armed with that referral, is to go behind the scenes and try and knock some heads together and say to heads of service, for instance, why are you saying that the going rate is 515 quid a week when you know it's 1,027? That's going to get us into a judicial review situation, because we will be judicially reviewed by a member of the public or their loved one for effectively undermining choice of accommodation rights. And if the head of service says, no way, I've got no more budget, then the monitoring officer's duty is to go to every single member of the council in writing to warn the councillors in whose name this policy is being conducted that the head of service is running the risk of a judicial review. So it's a completely free, intellectually ballistic challenge to a council that does not involve going to a lawyer, if at least you know enough of adult social care law from sites like ours in order to be able to write the letter.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So there's some new knowledge for many of you, I'm sure. I really want to get your conversations and questions in the chat, because we're going to bring everyone back in a bit later. But for now, I want to say thank you to you both. That was really helpful. Lots of links in the chat. Please go check both of them out, and the amazing work that they do. We'll come back to them shortly. But what I just wanted to move on to is to think about the human impact, because behind all of these disputes and the stress and the worry and anxieties that come from people who have relatives who are being threatened with being moved, and also as a provider, really worried about the well-being of people that you are supporting and how to deal with that. There are human stories. There are really human stories around that. And as you know, at Copus Youth Care, we like to platform those stories and that impact. And I'm really, really delighted that Sarah can join us today to talk about her experience. So I'm going to bring Sarah Wilcox in now. Afternoon, Sarah. How are you today?
Good, thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure.
And I know that you are CEO of Pathways Through Dementia. So maybe introduce some of your work that you do there, and then talk about your experience with having a relative in this position.
Thank you, Sophie. I founded Pathways Through Dementia in 2011 to provide a service for people who had questions about dementia and the law. We take hundreds of inquiries a year now. A lot of our referrals come from Admiral nurses through Dementia UK, and we talk to people about paying for care, managing finances, court of protection, lasting powers of attorney, welfare benefits, anything really to do with dementia and the law. We're not insured to give advice, so it's just information about the options that people have, and we can be contacted via email or phone. But Sophie, you'd asked me today really to talk about my experience with my mother-in-law. Before I get into the process that we went through with Vera, I think it's really important to highlight that when someone with dementia is living in a care home, the family are experiencing a huge range of really difficult emotions: grief, guilt, sadness, also worry. And this aspect of the process is, in my experience, rarely acknowledged. It's almost as if the person requiring local authority funded care becomes a financial nuisance to be dealt with as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible, which naturally feels really heartbreaking when people who love them are trying to navigate this area. And as I said, my charity takes hundreds of calls a year on this topic, and the lack of empathy from professionals is described to me frequently by our callers. I just wanted to mention that aspect of these scenarios before getting into the practicalities of advocating for one care home over another. So my mother-in-law entered a care home in 2024, and she had a year's worth of money. I contacted her council in June of last year to warn them that within 2 months she would be down to 23,250, which is the threshold, at which point the local authority needs to take action. Between then and November, when we sat down at a continuing care assessment, we had to point out that being moved was not in Vera's best interests, which is a principle enshrined in the Mental Capacity Act of 2005, that it was possibly in breach of human rights Article 8, right to a private and family life. We threatened to complain. We threatened to go to the local government and social care ombudsman. Then we were told on the 31st of October that she was being moved the next day to a care home we hadn't even seen. At that point, the care home manager of the care home where she was living stepped in to block that move at the 11th hour, and simply pointed out that the care home Vera was being moved to wasn't a dementia specialist care home. So she put a stop to that. By this point, my mother-in-law's money had completely run out, because ethically we felt that Vera should keep paying, or my husband was paying the care home through the lasting power of attorney. Otherwise, the care home would have been down £18,000. Belinda suggested that we contact the monitoring officer, which we did. And although that person never responded to us personally, I think maybe she exerted some influence behind the scenes, because that was when there was a tangible change in communications with us from adult social care. In the end, I think in December, so it had taken from June to December to get a decision, which was really, really stressful, especially for my husband. Vera was given FNC, so she got funded nursing care, NHS contribution, which in combination with her very good occupational pension and her state pension meant that she was then offered a room on another floor, but at the same care home where she was living. For us, it's impossible really to determine which point of law swayed the local authority from a position of stating that they would not pay for Vera, this was looking unlikely, in her current home, to actually paying for her in her current home. But obviously I would suggest using all of the arguments and all of the tools at your disposal, which Belinda has also described, to try and prevent a move from a care home that you like to a care home that you feel is not suitable.
Thank you for sharing. That was amazing. And I think it does take people like yourself to come forward and explain what happened to them, and also the benefits of having that support that can help you, because even though you're there to support your relative, there's only so much that you know, and you having that extra support from Belinda and her team to really speak to the right people and know who to speak to, I think is so important. And I think that's what the training that Paula and Belinda put together is trying to do, is to give us the tools that we can just go out and have that knowledge as providers ourselves to support people. We shouldn't have to. The system should just work honestly, transparently, but everyone's under a lot of pressures for whatever reason. These things aren't quite happening the way they should. But I want to understand, can you go through what impact that had, not just on yourself, but your mother-in-law? Did she know what was going on? How did that impact her? Were you able to shield her?
No, she is too far into her dementia to have participated in any of these conversations, which in a way was fortunate. But I do think that she was at a stage where moving her, she would have been aware that she'd been moved, because she had finally grasped where toilets were in the care home, where the lounge was in the care home. My mother-in-law is from St. Kitts in the Caribbean originally, and there were a lot of carers who were of the same ethnicity as her, which we really liked. And she definitely bonded with those carers more than other carers, thinking that mistakenly that they were family members, but she was very, very close with them. And it was a different setup. We did actually visit the care home that they'd suggested on the 31st of October, and it was a very different kind of setup there. It was more clinical, less homely. There were fewer toilets on different floors. I think she'd have been very aware that she'd been moved somewhere else. She wasn't that far into her dementia then, that she wouldn't have registered that change. And, it's a fact that generally moving people with dementia is not a brilliant idea.
Absolutely. And I think Ali is quite passionate about that as well. We'll come on to him in a minute. But so obviously she was blissfully unaware of all the things that you were going through. But what kind of emotional toll did it have on yourself and your family?
It was so stressful. And, even though I've listened to, probably over my whole career, similar to Belinda, I've worked in this area for 25 years and worked on various helplines. And I've heard these stories so many times, but when it happens to you, it really brings home how stressful it is. And it's little things like lack of communication, people making mistakes. I was amazed that the local authority hadn't looked into Vera's house in Wolverhampton, where actually her other son lives, and he's got serious mental health problems. So that property would have been automatically disregarded anyway, but it took them until, again, November to even ask about that property. So it's almost like there is a very clear system that social workers need to abide by, the steps they need to go through, but it was just completely chaotic.
Yeah,
that was what we really struggled with, and what I really struggled with, because I don't like chaos. I don't think anybody does really. But it was the chaotic nature of how things were communicated to us that was probably one of the most stressful aspects of the process. And I suspect that if the monitoring officer exerted any influence behind the scenes, she would have seen immediately how this had gone from an email in June that was very straightforward, asking what we needed to do, what the local authority needed from us, so that we could avoid the situation that we ended up in.
Yeah, exactly. Totally totally avoidable.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. And it really does bring home the effects that it has on people, and how important it is to understand what you can do about it, and understanding roles like the monitoring officer and all the complexities around the process that you can actually go through, and what they should be doing on their side, which lots of people might not be aware of. So thank you for bringing that home to us. We will bring you back in a bit for a bit of a group discussion, but I'm just going to bring in Ali now. But thank you, Sarah. Hello, Ali. How are you today?
Good, thank you.
So we are very lucky to have you from a provider perspective, and I know you've got lots to say about this, so I'm not going to ramble on too much, but I know that you've been through it before. Where do you want to start? Do you want to first introduce yourself and your organisation, and then really, I think just going into an example of what you had to deal with and how you had to really swat up as to what the rights that you could support your clients to exercise in these matters.
Yes, so this is something that's consumed the last 18 months of my life. We've been through 6 cases of this. We're in the middle of 2 now. We've gone 8 months without any fees for one resident. We're now currently at 16 months for another. In that time, I've been, the kindest thing that I've been is ignored. I've been blackmailed, I've been threatened, I've been lied to. So I know I'm on the right side, because you don't stoop to those lengths when you're in the right on this. And it's sad more than anything. It's really sad that we're having to fight for someone that doesn't want to move from a care home, and we're having to fight public officers on that. But it's a fight that we have to have now, unfortunately, and it's burnt bridges, and it's difficult, actually. It's something that's, when I need to talk about it, it's actually harder than it is, because it's not my nature to be in these problems. It's not my nature to have to get into these arguments, but I'm the one that faces the families. I'm the one that they come to when they say to me, Mum's going to have to move. They've told us she has to move to a cheaper home. They're the ones that look at me as if I'm going to be the one to evict them when I've had enough, you know. And no amount of reassurance has ever put someone's mind to rest that won't happen. Hopefully being patient for 16 months will go some way to having some credibility in that. But the nuts and bolts and the black and white argument of it is, never ever has a social worker started this process by coming in and doing an assessment to find out the needs of the individual. Never. In every single occasion, the first conversation that's been had with a family member is, we don't fund that home, she'll have to move to a cheaper home, I'll put a list together. Never has the assessment been done. And the assessments are only ever done when they're pushed for it, when they're reminded of that duty, that they have to come and do it. Either that's from me, or even better, it's from a family to say you need to come and assess mum's needs. And it's very obvious why they do that. It's very obvious why they try to bypass the statutory duties. It's because they'll never get the answer they want doing that. They'll never get, yes, Mrs. Jones is happy to move. They'll never get that. So they try to bypass it. And I've had discussions with commissioners who I'll never agree with, and they won't agree with me, but we can discuss the complexities around statutory guidance. We can discuss the law. We can discuss what people have to do. But the theory and the practice are 2 completely different things. That's the fundamental issue, is that the law says one thing, that this guidance has to be followed. The law is clear, the Care Act is clear around the needs of the individual having to be met. The case law is clear around the individual's rights to be assessed, to have their needs met, emotional, physical, everything. But the practice from commissioners, and I say commissioners because I don't like to attack the social workers too much, because I think A, they're not fully trained on this matter, and B, they're not fully informed on this matter. So it's coming down from above. So commissioners bypass that obligation and try to coerce a family and a care home into allowing an eviction to happen. For me, the first case that happened in September 24 was a lady who'd been with us for over 7 years. And I never thought that if she depleted her funds below the threshold, we'd have an issue. But lo and behold, the family came and said, Mum's going to have to move. And instinctively, you know, that doesn't sound right. You don't need to get on Google or speak to a lawyer to know that that doesn't quite sound like it's fair. And that's what sent me down the rabbit hole. And luckily for that lady, the family were very strong and they pushed very hard. And for 8 months, we fought them and eventually succeeded. But the tactics were already being revealed. You know, all of a sudden she was on the waiting list for a social worker, so no assessment could be done. And that went on for months and months. At the same time, another lady was told, another resident was told they'd have to move to a cheaper home. This time, the social worker instructed the family to go and view a nursing home. We're residential, so without conducting any assessment, this social worker has decided to try and move an assessed lady for residential care into a nursing home. Again, we won that one because that was a pretty bad mistake to make. And we've had other cases since then. In fact, our most recent started last week with the exact same conversation. The family spoke to me and they said, the social workers told me over the phone that mum's going to have to move to a cheaper care home. And so, here we go again. It's like Groundhog Day. It's important now, I think, for the most important voice is the families, but not all families, A, are going to be wise to this, because why would you not trust a local authority? But B, for providers, for us, we now need to be a lot tougher than what we are, even if it's in the sense of supporting the family who may be involved. In the case of if a resident doesn't have anybody, being the advocate for that resident as well. We have to be a lot stronger, because what I've found in the last year is you will win. You will always win. They've never come in and moved someone based on cost. They've never come in and packed their bags and moved them like they said they would. If you push back, if you force them to comply with the statutory guidance, if you force them to come and do the assessment, put it in writing why this person, it's in their best interests to move to a cheaper home, put it in writing, we'll pack their bags, come and do it. It won't be done, because the law, when it comes to assess needs, if somebody's been living in a care home for 4 or 5 years, say, their emotional well-being is an assessed need to consider. And if they have established relationships, if their cognitive function is better in the environment that they're in, with the relationships that they have, that is an assessed need. So moving them would be detrimental to that. Hence, no assessments get done, because that is something by law a settled resident has the right to be assessed on it as well. And trying to overcome that with persuasion or even coercion, again, is obviously something I wouldn't expect any social worker or anybody to try and do. So they're not going to go down that road either. So the tactics being used, and again, I understand people who are discussing this rationally, as if to say, this is what the law says, these are both sides of the arguments. I understand that, and I respect that. This all comes down to the practice that's taking place, more so than the law, much more than the law. It's the practice, it's the way they're going about it, it's the way it's being done. It is deceitful, it's unlawful. They're not doing those assessments, they're not doing the needs, they're not taking anyone's wishes into account, they're not even asking. They are simply telling you, you have to move to a cheaper home. And when I've pushed back, and when I've argued, and when I've had the arguments with commissioners or members of those teams from other local authorities, funding pressure always comes back. It is always the first thing that's brought up, the funding challenges. And we're not able to fund more expensive homes and things. I'm afraid, respectfully, I don't care, because funding pressure, it's not a valid excuse to break the law. It's not a justification for a council. It's not a justification for a provider. It's not a justification for a shoplifter. It's not a justification for a drug dealer. You can't go breaking the law because you're skinned. So it's not a valid. It's not a valid argument to make on legal ground. And the forest for the trees. Sorry, and the thing that local authorities don't quite see is that there is a positive solution here. There is an outcome here. Because if you can demonstrate that you cannot fulfill your statutory duties with the funding model that we currently have, and that includes these forced relocations, if you cannot fulfill every statutory duty, you can go back and say, we can't do it. it's not enough. Legally, it's not enough. But when you bend the rules and you act unlawfully and you force people to move by lying, you're simply saying back to government or back to counties that we're fine. The funding's fine. We've saved the money that you wanted us to save, but you've done it by statistically shortening someone's life. Because we all know if someone with dementia moves home that they're settled in, we all know, we've read the studies about the potential risk to life there. So you've chosen that over standing up for the wider sector. And there is that is a positive outcome that can happen here. Absolutely. There is short-term pain. There is going to be difficult challenges with it, but the long-term outcome is better for everybody if everybody just complied with the statutory guidance.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you for saying that. And I think that you've really hit a nerve for a lot of people who are going through the same thing, who feel very disempowered, who want to support people, and it's very stressful and it's really hard for everyone involved. And your last point is just really pertinent, because one of the things that I hear a lot of, not to get political, but it does come down to funding. I hear a lot of health ministers say is, why are, when we're really frustrated, why they're talking a lot about the NHS, why are they not talking about social care? And it's because a lot of the time they say, well, you know what, no matter how much we throw at social care, no matter how much we neglect it, it always seems to somehow survive. It always seems to do something out of nothing and pull out rabbits out of a hat. So politically, we're just going to leave it as it is, and we're just going to concentrate with other things. And I feel like what you're saying, the link between that is that if we have the people in the system, where it's the local authorities, or providers not really understanding what we can do in this space, not doing anything, and feeling that they can't have anything that they can do, and they are just then trying to make do, and people are suffering or passing on earlier than they should do, then we are just digging our own grave in a way. Sorry for putting that imagery in people's minds, but we are just trying to do something out of nothing, and people are suffering. So I think the whole idea about raising awareness isn't just listen to a course and find out more about it. It's about, yes, listen to the courses that Paula and Belinda have to raise your awareness, and also act on it. Don't be afraid to act on it. And I think listening to you and the sacrifices that you must have made in order to make sure that you're trying to support people with their rights in this space, it's just been amazing. And I know I'm going to bring everyone else in a second, but someone did say that it's wearing them down. I presume this is a provider. They're tough, but it's really wearing them down. And I'm guessing you also find the same frustration.
Well,
it's
that's the game, right? That's the tactic. It's to wear you down and beat you up until you can't go anymore. And honestly, that's the only thing that actually keeps me going half the time, is that because it's so transparent that the objective is to just wear you out until you give up, whether it's through delayed correspondence or just non-answers to things. The objective for them is a war of attrition, and they believe they can last the longest in this one. That's the only thing that's ever really kept me going, is that if I'm wrong, if I'm completely wrong and you're right, that's fine. I'm good with losing if I'm the one in the wrong. But if you're just trying to win by making me tap out, then I know I'm right, and I can't let go of that fact. So I would always say to providers who are facing that, that's exactly what they want to happen here. Mm-hmm. They want that war of attrition. Your job, and if your screens start to vibrate, is because my dog is snoring, by the way.
I thought someone was snoring in the background. I didn't want to say.
Yeah, he's let's see if I can just stop him.
He's fine. He's lovely.
Yeah, but so for all the providers facing that, that is the objective in a lot of cases. Because if you could legally do it, and if you're absolutely right that you can come in and move someone, it wouldn't take 5 minutes for you to come in and shut me up and do it. That's how I view the situation. So
Thank
I
you
would,
for your tenacity in that and for coming on and sharing that with us, because I think some people need to hear from other providers. A lot of people, we try to struggle on our own and we think maybe it's just us, but actually a lot of us are going through the same thing in a lot of different areas, and that there is a solution. So if everyone wouldn't mind me, a panelist, I'm going to bring everybody in again. And I know there's been quite a lot of activity in the chat. Maybe you might want to pick up on any of that. I'm going to come to you, Belinda, first. If there's anything you want to come back on with anything that's been said or pick up anything in the chat, then please feel free to do that.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to stress that the choice of accommodation rights that give an individual the right to get the local authority to put their loved one where their person is going to be happiest is a right that is subject to the local authority's usual rate, the personal budget, in fact. And so I've seen in the chat a lot of providers are saying we are forced to bid against each other. We are forced to give discounts to make the top up as small as possible. And what I wanted to say to that, even though it sounds harsh, is that providers are in business, and whether they are charities or whether they are for profit, the bottom line is that they need to have done a negotiation at the time when they took the person on. And if they did that with a self-funder, then there would have been no argument as to what was wants and what was needs. When a local authority comes and does an assessment, it's very common for local authorities to effectively shove the care planning function onto the provider and get the provider to say what the provider thinks is needed. Sometimes the local authority ratifies that care plan, sometimes they just leave it in a drawer. But the bottom line is that the client who needs to stay will be somebody that the provider knows very well by then and would be able to do a good care plan for. If they're going to go down the top-up route, the provider needs to be able to say what they wish to do for that person that is a want and not a need. And it's at that point that the family member needs to say to the local authority, I disagree that those things are wants. I think that they are part of the Care Act. I think they're part of promoting well-being. I think they're part of human rights. And if providers don't learn these things, then they are making a choice to dig their own grave. And when providers say we don't have a choice, we are all forced to compete, I am sorry for them, but that is in the nature of the game. The game is that the local authority is the squeezed middle without sufficient money from central government because of the political choices that we've all made for whatever reason. And the bottom line is that the commissioners never go to legal framework training. The brokers and the commissioners know no public law at all, and that's how they can live with themselves. The social workers aren't trained because they're all doing three people's jobs, because local authorities have had to make so many people redundant. So the reality is that everybody needs to know that you don't need a social worker to do an assessment. Local authorities are entitled to put unqualified people, as long as they're experienced and competent and subject to supervision, on the job of assessment under the Care Act. And there is no law that says the assessment has to await a social worker. There's also the power in Section 19 to meet the needs urgently, even if there hasn't been an assessment finished. So some of the ruses that Ali has said are effectively rolled out are easy to defeat, and writing to the monitoring officer is the way.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And Paula, I presume that a lot of what Belinda is saying is also in the course.
Yes, yeah, Belinda deals with the facts and case law and how to go about it, what needs to be said. And I think, as Ali said, 16 months without fees, most providers can't do that. So if this is a war of attrition, we're doomed. We really are doomed, because providers will fold, and then it's a question of even more difficulties.
Yeah.
I have seen some local government ombudsman reports where the complainant is, unbelievably enough, the care provider. And when you read the complaint, you discover that the care provider has been carrying the funding of the client for 15 or 18 months. And in one case, I think it was something like over £100,000 was owing, at whatever rate was going to be paid. And the Ombudsman did not do the usual thing of saying to the provider, you can use the civil court, this is just a contractual dispute. The Ombudsman actually said, I can see that there is no actual dispute in this case about what has been provided. It is just the local authority systems that are at fault. And so I wanted to hold out to providers as well as to members of families that there are remedies that are available, but there is no microchip that you can just stick in your head that gives you this knowledge. And it is hard won, and I can't dumb it down to make it bite-sized. It just requires reading and thinking hard. If social workers are getting it wrong and they're claiming professional status, then that's of concern. And I think ultimately my fear is that professionalism in adult social care, social work, will just disappear down the pan if we don't stand up and say we'd all like there to be some professionals by the time we need social care.
That is the point. And I really am grateful for all of you actually for coming on. And I know this is a passion of yours, Belinda, since the time I've known you, is this professionalism, is this awareness of the law, of awareness of the tools. You know, a lot of people fought really hard to make sure that these laws are in place, and if we aren't using them, then we are letting them down, we're letting the people that we support down, and there's a lot that goes on that supports the laws, the codes of practice and whatnot, and it's really important to really try and grow awareness and encourage people to increase their own awareness if they don't have time to go and watch the videos or engage in it. And I think they should. I think that's not an excuse. But do you provide support for people to represent them in these cases and to dig into things themselves yourself, Belinda?
We will do it through an organisation. We will do it through a provider organisation. We cannot provide advice to members of the public any longer. Cascader used to be a charity, and we charged a very low fee for 3 to 5 hours of advice. In fact, we gave 3 to 5 hours of advice for free and then charged a very low rate for people who needed extra. It's so long ago and I'm so exhausted I can hardly remember. But that folded because it is not sustainable. And when providers say that their businesses aren't sustainable, I would ask them to bear in mind that the business that the clients need is access to advice and information. We can't sustain advice at this moment, but that's why we provide the information, often for free. I've got podcasts with busting myths for providers, busting myths for local authorities, and busting myths for members of the public. And all I would like to see at what is going to be the end of my career one day soon, I would like to see the rule of law being applied in adult social care.
Amen to that. And then can I just ask someone in my team to put in the link to your podcast if they can find it? Otherwise, we will email it to people on the Eventbrite who've signed up to join that way. So thank you. I've heard a lot from Belinda. Thank you. I think that was a great note to end on, actually. Paula, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, let's just work together. We need to work together for the good of the residents.
Great, absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed listening to you as well. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
Just to add to what Ali said, you know, my client group, people living with dementia, you often have partners of the person with dementia who are elderly themselves. And I think, as Ali said, they tap out because they are really exhausted. And that's really sad that they just have got to a point where they can't fight anymore.
Absolutely. That is so sad, so sad. And we shouldn't be there. That's not why we get into care or caring. Ali, any final words or thoughts from you?
Just that if your loved one depletes their funds below a threshold, and the first thing the social worker says is they'll have to move to a cheaper home, they're breaking the law. And never forget that.
Really helpful, really helpful. There's always something that we can do. Thank you all so very, very much. I'm going to take you out of the stream now. This is the clunky part of it. There we are. Hopefully everyone found that really useful. I did. I just love that panel. I'm so grateful that I was able to get them to come along. The next panel that I'm going to have next week, and I'm so, again, grateful for them. I've got wonderful guests, Helith Wynne, Janet Shreve, Lisa McLean, and Ali Dickinson. I introduced it at the beginning. I'm just going to end with this just to encourage everyone to sign up to our mailing list, because we'll send out some information about this next one, about being prepared, not scared, about end of life. And I'm just managed to nab myself an end of life doula for this, and I've wanted to platform someone like this because I don't think people know about the law, about this person and this role, and how they can support you with that. And generally, I just think that raising awareness about how to prepare for the end of life, not just for us, people we support, but also for ourselves and for our families. It's more than just wills and funeral planning. There's so much more to it. And really what I want to stress with this coming live stream on end of life is, when you are with somebody at their end of their life, you want to focus on them and their well-being and their passing, and making that passing as blessed and as comfortable and as stress-free as possible. But in order to have that, there's certain things, legal documents, that you need to really prepare when someone has capacity, that you can do now, that will prepare you to be 100% present for those people, at that time when they need you the most. Because with blended families, with big families, with small families, it's really hard when you have to do these things when you've got all the emotions happening and you want to really be present for your family. So I encourage everyone to sign up for that one, and to share that one and to come along. And there's going to be some great takeaways for that. I've really enjoyed today, and thank you everyone for joining. Please make sure that there's lots of information in the description in the chat how to follow up with the guests we've had on today. Be sure to tune into everything that we're doing, and hopefully that you can do more of following us and liking, and sharing, and everything else. So thank you everyone. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon. Thank you for joining us this lunchtime, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Take care everyone.